You were teaching about the genealogy in Matthew chapter 1. And, of course, this is an age-old problem. Matthew 1 gives the genealogy of Joseph in one way, and then Luke gives it in a different way. And ancient Christians were dealing with this problem. I actually did some interesting research and found out that this really bothered the Christians. They're like, wait a minute, our claim here is that Yeshua is the adopted son of Joseph, and we're giving Joseph's genealogy. And they don't line up, Matthew and Luke. Anybody who reads it is going to see immediately they're completely different genealogies. Both going back to David, but through different routes. And so one of the solutions that they gave, and really creative, we call this intellectual acrobatics in Hebrew. We call it shminiot ba'avir. And I mean, it's
actually a Hebrew term for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it literally means in Hebrew, it's like when those biplanes make the eights in the air. Like, this is what they're doing. It's these intellectual acrobatics to try to figure this out. What they were saying is, for example, well, Joseph's father was actually married to his uncle's widow. In other words, it was a levirate marriage. Right. And so one genealogy is for his uncle, and one is for his biological father, right? One is for his genealogy father, which is his uncle, and the other is for his biological father. Okay, but it doesn't say that anywhere. You guys just made that up. Right? And if you want to say that, fine. So you had a different solution based on the Aramaic, which I heard over 20 times. Can you tell the people about that, like what the Aramaic solution is? And then I'll explain how the Hebrew comes in, which, I mean, I think changes everything.
And this is very important. This is a question that was posed to me over 20 years ago. First time I came into Jerusalem, and a rabbi handed me a sheet of paper, which I still have, and it's a $10,000 reward for any Christian who can answer all of these problems or contradictions in the New Testament. And I thought, this is a coincidence. I could use $10,000 right now because my room was broken into. I was robbed the night before. But the question number 10, that was a real stumper. And I went back to one of the rabbis that actually was involved, a Jewish lawyer that was involved in this. And I said, it took me an entire week to answer the first 9. It took me 17 years to answer the last one. Show from the Christian Bible that Yeshua is any blood relative of King David.
Interesting.
They know the problem.
Interesting.
They know the problem. And yet we have, in other words, all these things that you just mentioned, they don't qualify, and they know it doesn't qualify.
You're actually bringing, that's an interesting thing. You're saying there's another problem from a Jewish perspective, which is that the genealogy in Matthew and the genealogy in Luke both are presented as genealogies of Joseph. So even if you can reconcile them with some clever explanation like the levirate marriage, they're still not. There's still no blood relative of Yeshua.
Right.
Wow, that's a really interesting part of that. Yeah.
And so there's no way with what we had to answer that, except for in the Aramaic, it says that Joseph was, first of all, we have Joseph, who is the son of Yaakov, who is the Givrah, the mighty man of Mary. And they translated in King James. It translated into Greek as Aner, which is just a man of full age, but it just translated as husband of Miriam. And later on, it does say that Joseph, the husband of Miriam, in verse 17, but we don't have the 14 generations that Matthew says we have. We only have 13 generations. And if Joseph is the husband of Miriam, and I said that it had to be, as it is in Aramaic, Givrah, that has to be translated as father. That's what I said. And you weren't convinced of this at all.
So it's one of those things where, could you translate, because Givrah or Givrah means something like man, right? And man, in a generic sense, in Semitic languages, means husband. And there isn't actually a word for husband and wife in Semitic languages. There's man and woman, right? In Hebrew, it's ish v'isha, man and woman. And in Aramaic, it's similar. It's guvra and intata. So they just mean man and woman, right? So if you saw the word man in a context like this, it really would be a stretch to say, well, it's a man, and we're not saying which man, and we're saying it's the Father. That's kind of a stretch to me. So I wasn't convinced.
Okay.
But I was looking for more manuscripts of the Hebrew Matthew, because I had found at that point, I believe, 26. And like I said, many of these were, you throw something at the wall to see what sticks. You pull out a microfilm, you spend an hour looking through it. Yeah, it's got nothing to do with Matthew. You move on to the next one. And you do this day after day, and then you do find stuff. If you put in enough time and effort, you can find stuff that you wouldn't expect to find. Well, I'm looking through, and there I am looking at this manuscript, and it's a single page, and it only has the genealogy for Matthew chapter 1, and it's a manuscript from the Oxford University Bodleian Library. And I'm looking at it, and really what I'm doing is cataloging what I found, right? So when I find one of these sections of Hebrew Matthew, I say, okay, most of them aren't complete. So all right, it starts in chapter 1, verse 1, and it goes to chapter 12, verse 2, right? And so I'm cataloging. I'm saying, okay, what's the first verse? What's the last verse? And as I look at the last verse, I see where it says Yosef, Avi Miriam, Joseph, the father of Miriam. Meaning what you had speculated as essentially an interpretation of the Aramaic is said explicitly in the Hebrew Matthew in this one manuscript, and it's incontrovertibly saying, without any question, that here in Matthew is Joseph, the genealogy of Joseph, the father of Miriam. In other words, Miriam married a man named Joseph, but also had a father named Joseph.
Right.
That's the solution that you were suggesting as essentially as an interpretation, and in my view, it was a stretch of an interpretation. But here, there's no interpretation; it's explicit. Joseph, the father of Miriam, in this Hebrew document, and then of course I'm looking for more manuscripts, and I find a second witness, and that is a manuscript that was in the JTS, the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York. They had a manuscript that said the exact same thing. And can we show this to the people?
This is it.
So this is the manuscript, and at the end of the line here, it says Yosef, Avi, Miriam, Joseph, the father of Miriam. Now, when I discovered this years ago, I don't know if I should say this. So I did something I wasn't supposed to do. Maybe I won't say. I had a photo that I wasn't supposed to have. But it was really low resolution.
You gave it to somebody that wasn't supposed to have it.
Right. Okay. I won't go into details, but basically it was a horrible low resolution photo. Now, for the first time ever, as of literally yesterday, I have because we were sitting down talking about what are we going to share with the people, and you said, Nehemia, you found the 1,000 manuscripts with the name because all these manuscripts are online. Is the Joseph, father of Mary manuscript up online? And I said, I don't know. I didn't look. So we looked and it was. Now we have a high resolution. This one is in grayscale. It's much better quality image than what we had before. And you can clearly see, if you read Hebrew, it's as clear as day.
As we print this out, you can see the fibers.
Oh, and the other one is in color. You can actually see like wrinkles in the leather that it's written on, in the parchment. It's unbelievable. Yeah, you see like where there were fibers and wrinkles in the leather. It's of that high quality, this color photograph from Oxford University. And now what, back in the day, not that long ago, I had to, pull the microfilm and show you black and white and try to do something with it. Now these are available at the click of a button to anybody who at least knows how to find it, right? Which that's not so small thing either. But what I love that you're going to be doing is sharing this with people on television where they can see for themselves. Don't believe the Jew from Jerusalem that it's there in the manuscript, the Hebrew manuscript. You can see it for yourself. I love that we live in this period of history that we can now get this. I mean, when we hear about this in Daniel, it talks about how knowledge will increase. And I believe, Michael, that we are in this period of knowledge increasing where we don't have to rely on what it says in the encyclopedia. We can actually go and see the original text for ourselves, the original sources. That's such a powerful thing. Look, I've said this many times, Michael. I was born and raised in Illinois, but in my heart, I'm from Missouri, which is the show-me state. I want to see it with my own two eyes. And today we live in this period where I can pull this up on the computer and I can show you where it says it. And you can see the fibers and the imperfections in the ink, and you can see where look, and there's two miracles here. One is that this manuscript survived. The other is that I found it, right? Because this is one of 90,000 manuscripts. This is a single page out of 90,000 manuscripts.
A single page, and that is all of the Hebrew math that exists in that
manuscript, right?
In that manuscript.
And you have to understand what happened is in the Middle Ages, the Jewish manuscripts were a little different than Christian manuscripts. Christian manuscripts had official centers where they would be copied. What would happen with Jewish manuscripts is you'd have a rich Jew who was usually a merchant or a doctor, and he would go to a scribe and say, I want to study. Make me a collection of books that I can study. And so they'd put 10 pages of Maimonides and 20 pages of the Talmud and, 5 pages of the Hebrew New Testament, right? I mean, that kind of thing happened, right? Mm-hmm. And in this instance, he has 1 page of the Hebrew New Testament. Why does he have that? Maybe the guy wasn't that interested in this topic, right? And so the scribe would, he had a bunch of books on his shelf, and he'd pull out the book, and he'd say, okay, my patron who ordered this manuscript isn't really interested in the New Testament so much. I'm just going to copy 1 page from my source, put that back on the shelf. Now some pages from Maimonides, and I mean that's very typical. So that's why you have many manuscripts in Jewish and collections of Hebrew manuscripts around the world in libraries where it'll say miscellaneous. And God only knows, literally in some cases, what's in those miscellaneous documents. There could be more.